Boom. What's going on, party people? It's been a little while since we got to sit down, have a little chat. One of the things that I did not fully appreciate when I started this podcast was going to be the difficulty in scheduling folks to come on. When I first got started, um, my buddy who runs his own channel uh, suggested that I get 3 or 4 episodes in the can before I start putting them out. And so that's exactly what I did. I got my 3 or 4 episodes, and then I put them out all at once. So the idea being that, hey, when you first find somebody that you like to listen to, we like to binge through their stuff, and that I should have more than one episode for people to take a look at. And so that's kind of what I did. I got 3 or 4 episodes in the can, and then I put them all out at once. And then I was fortunate enough to get a guest for the very next week. And then life gets in the way, and other people's schedules get in the way. And some of those people who you thought would be like really down to come in and have a conversation, once it comes down to actually putting them in front of a mic, they get a little bashful about that. And so it's been a challenge trying to get guests on. I have a list of probably a dozen people that I want to have on. It's just a matter of scheduling. So I hope you'll bear with me. I've been feeling a little bit guilty about that. And then I was watching a creator on YouTube that I watch, Peter McKinnon, and he'd kind of been going through the same thing for our last little period of time. And he said he was having a discussion with somebody the other day, and they're like, we really don't care what you're doing. We just want to know what you've been up to. Just come on the camera and talk so we can update your life. And that kind of spoke to me a little bit. Just go into the studio and create something and put it out, and hopefully it will speak to people. So we're gonna start a new series here on the Cover Now podcast. It's gonna be Shawn Solo. Yeah, baby, you heard it here first. Shawn Solo, episode 1. So here we go. What have I been up to recently? I just got back from Colorado. I had an opportunity to work with a buddy of mine on a government contract out in Colorado. And essentially it was working with the Army, helping them load heavy vehicles onto a train. So this unit is heading out of the country for on a deployment for a certain period of time. And they, in order to get their vehicles from Colorado out to a shipping port, you need to put the vehicles onto rail cars. And so my buddy owns a company that basically consults for that. So we would go out, work with the Army soldiers, coaching them on the proper ways of how to load vehicles onto rail cars, and chaining them down and wiring them for safety and this, that, and the other thing. And it sounds like super labor intensive, which it was. It was a lot of work, long days. The weather was unforgiving. We had snow and we had wind and we had all that kind of good stuff. But it was also a super lot of fun. I've been training and coaching in different areas throughout my career and my life. For 24 years of my law enforcement career, probably 12 of those was in some sort of training capacity, either training new employees at the facilities that I was working at, or my last 3 years was as an academy training officer, helping to run an academy for my department. And so it was super fun to get back into a training, coaching, mentoring type capacity. I didn't realize how much I had missed that. And just being able to, being a prior Marine myself, getting to hang out with the soldiers for a few days, and just kind of the whole camaraderie and shit talk and stuff that goes along with that was a lot of fun. So hopefully we get to do more of that in the future. It involves a lot of travel, which is also something that I enjoy doing. Again, my first time out in Colorado, and interestingly, where we were at, we had an Airbnb while we were out there. So it was like 8 or 9 guys working for the company, all shacked up in an Airbnb, super nice, hot tub, sauna, gym, big like gourmet type kitchen. And where it was situated was about 200 meters away from the entrance of NORAD, which, for those of you who are of my generation, you remember, NORAD was like this big nuke place. So NORAD is the North American Aeronautical Defense place, where they burrow into the side of a mountain and everybody works there. And in the 80s, I mean, there was all kinds of like movies with the Russian threat of nukes, and I remember movies talking about NORAD and pushing the button, and so it was kind of freaky deaky to be in this house that was like, I shit you not, like 200 meters away from the entrance of NORAD, and had a very kind of movie-ish kind of feel to it. It's kind of cool and kind of makes for a cool story. So that's what I've been up to the last couple of weeks. Also been doing a little bounty hunting on the side here in Southern California. The same buddy who owns the rail company that I was working with the last couple of weeks also has a bounty hunting company of his. And so that kind of fits into my wheelhouse. It was cool. A few weeks ago, we went out and picked up a guy who was actually out of San Diego County. We went and picked him up in Riverside County, which is just the county north of San Diego County. But his court appearance was down in San Diego in the North County. So it was super cool to be able to go down there and see all the folks in the North County facility that I had worked at but hadn't seen since my retirement in March of 17. So a lot of fun there. It was really cool to be able to kind of sit down with a bunch of guys and just kind of have a bros week out. I was able to have a talk with my friend about male relationships and how much I'm later on in life really beginning to appreciate those more. I found growing up as a kid in San Diego, I was kind of a nerd, and if I'm truthful, I was a pretty sensitive kind of kid, kind of artsy, really into music and into art and into reading, and not really into the typical things that most teenage boys are into. I wasn't into sports because I was just, completely uncoordinated, I thought. Typical kind of guy stuff just didn't interest me, and so I found that most of my friends and my close friends were girls, and that was the way it's always been kind of growing up, that most of my closer relationships were with women, and I think I really missed out. just in the last year or two. Now that I'm in my 50s, um, it's kind of a different time. Like men are much more able to be much more vulnerable now, and form those closer those closer bonds. We're able to sit down as men and talk about the things that affect us and worry us, uh, emotionally, and the difficulties that we have. And I think that's really opened up an opportunity for us to form some really close male relationships, and I'm learning to appreciate that, a lot. Um, I'm not exactly sure what changed or when it changed. Maybe it's just kind of our natural evolution. Um, but I'm really learning to appreciate those close male relationships, and with guys who will literally just drop what they're doing at the drop of a hat and come help a brother out. Like that's kind of what it was with this job in Colorado. It was sort of a last minute thing in that we only had, a couple weeks to plan it. And one of the benefits of being retired now is that I can just kind of pick up and go do whatever it is that sounds cool that I want to do. So my buddy calls me up one day and says, "Hey, I've got this government contract out in Colorado in a couple weeks. I'm going to need your help. This is when we leave." Okay, cool. And I'm in a position to do that. But there were several, in fact, the majority of the guys who went out there are still working 9 to 5 jobs. And my friend has cultivated these friendships over the years that allow him to call his friends that are still have 9 to 5 jobs, and they will take a week of vacation, or they will drop what they're doing at their jobs and come out and help him out. And that's super cool. It was nice to be able to meet other men like that. We like to think in law enforcement that we're like that, that we always have each other's backs, and that's sort of the idealistic kind of view is that we're a big family, and all these folks are gonna have your back, and they'll drop things at the on a moment's notice and come help you out. And when you're on the job, I think that's true. Um, I can't recall a time where I ever asked for help for somebody, or needed help when they didn't come, or any time that somebody else needed help and I didn't get there. But on a personal level, uh, that doesn't always happen. Um, I can remember any number of times having to move. I mean, just the act of moving, right? You're moving from one place to another, and you put out the call, "Hey, man, I need some help moving," and it's like crickets. You're like, what? And embarrassingly, I was in the exact same position. We're all trying to to live our lives, and everybody has a lot of things going with kids and spouses and sports and jobs and family commitments and things of that nature. Um, so that ideal is not always lived up to, or what you feel that ideal should be is not always lived up to, and I am just, if not more, guilty of that than anybody else. So all that to say that it's super cool being in a position now as a retiree that I have the luxury and the ability to drop things at a moment's notice and and go do or take advantage of opportunities like this. It's I've found since I've been retired that I'm very militant. I'm very militant with my time in that I have a real sort of fear of job commitment. Um, I've had a few opportunities to take full-time jobs, working full-time hours again, and I find myself balking at that very much. I think that spending 25 years in a machine where the shots are being called by the people who are cutting your paycheck is not great. And so many years of, and especially as a first responder, um, so many things that you miss. Birthdays and holidays and um, weekends and years of vacations that you don't take, um, days off that you don't get because of mandatory overtime or uh, whatever other commitment work the machine requires of us. And so I find myself to be very resistant to that now. I have a few part-time gigs, basically. When I have the time and the interest to go do those things, then I will. But then I also maintain the ability to take advantage of opportunities as they arise. And I'm sure, just like every other decision, there's consequences to that. I don't have a job with benefits. My income is a little bit spotty. It causes it involves a certain amount of chaos in my life. And for a person who sort of thrives on routine, it can be a little bit disconcerting sometimes of not knowing what's coming tomorrow. And so I've had to be sensitive to that in myself as well as my family. And I'm learning to do the best that I can to keep those that I love informed of what's coming just as soon as I can. I'm sure it's a little bit unnerving sometimes to come home and have your spouse, oh, hey, honey, by the way, I'm leaving tomorrow for 2 weeks to go do blah, blah, blah. Or you thought I was going to be gone for 2 weeks and now I'm coming home tomorrow. I'm sure it's a little, it can be a little, like I said, a little unnerving or a little disconcerting. But I wouldn't, I honestly would not have it any other way. Most recently, I got into driving big rig trucks. Like on paper, it seemed like the best thing ever, right? Like I love to drive. I get a lot of hours by myself. I enjoy a certain amount of solitude. You don't have you don't have a supervisor looking over your shoulder. You really get to call your own shots. You get to travel and see stuff that you haven't seen. Like during my time doing that, I've lived in California my entire life, pretty much more than 50 years. And just in the few months that I was driving a truck, I'd seen parts of California and Arizona and Nevada that I had never seen before. So that was super cool. And the money is not bad. I mean, it's not. I suppose you could make six figures doing it if you're an over the road uh, trucker who's gone for weeks at a time. I was on a regional route, so I was basically gone 4 nights a week and home for 3. Um, so the money wasn't bad. I was guaranteed at the time $1,000 a week, and the work to pay ratio is pretty damn good. I mean, really, it's kind of it's just like working in a cubicle, only your cubicle is on wheels, and you got a steering wheel in your hands. Um, so the money wasn't bad. What I didn't realize or appreciate was that it took me away from absolutely everything that I care about, everything that I love. Um, it took me away from my family at least 4 or 5 days a week, like gone, not, you know, come home after 8 hours and see everybody every night, like gone 4 or 5 days straight every single week. Um, so it took me away from my family. My wife and I aren't like big phone talkers, right? It's not like we're calling each other, 3, 4, 5 times a day, like some couples that I know. And even when we do talk on the phone, our conversation usually lasts about 5 minutes. Oh, how was your day, honey? Fine. How was your day? Oh, fine. What'd you do? Oh, nothing new. It's all just kind of the same work thing. Yeah, me too. Da 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 da. And then 5 minutes later, okay, well that's all I got. Well, that's all I got. Okay, well I'll talk to you tomorrow in a couple of days, right? Um, so you really miss out on the nuances of your relationship that way. Um, it completely took me away working a Sunday to Thursday schedule. Took me away from my church community, which I've really come to value. A lot of good people there, making a lot of good friendships there. It's a community that I've really come to enjoy, and so not being able to go to church on Sunday uh, was not a great thing for me. Um, and nobody is surprised about that more than me. If you had come to me 2 years ago and said that, 2 years from now, you're going to be an active member of your church and work and volunteer at your church, and you're going to miss those folks when you're not there, I would have said you are completely out of your fucking mind. So, uh, you can teach an old dog new tricks. We can live a resurrected life and put our pasts behind us and move forward, which gives me hope. So I was completely taken away from that, and not having coworkers to work with. I actually discovered that I missed. Again, uh, when I was in law enforcement, I worked on a steady team with the same people for 12 and a half hour shifts, half of the year. And I learned that I don't hate people as much as I thought I did. I just need long periods to recharge, you know. When you get up at 4 a.m. or 4 p.m., whichever, depending on if you're on days or nights, which we switched every 3 months, by the way. So, it's impossible to get into any kind of routine. When you get up at 4 o'clock to be in briefing at 6 and then work a minimum of 12 and a half hours, sometimes 16, sometimes 18, and then another hour to an hour and a half drive home. Hopefully you're home by 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And then in order to try and get your 8 hours of sleep, you got to go right to bed as soon as you get home. So, you walk in the door and hi fam, um, go to bed and hopefully try and get, 6 to 8 hours of sleep before you're up again at 4 and rinse and repeat. And so after an entire, you know, working week, you just want to go home and chill. You're just so overwhelmed and overloaded by everything that's gone on during your work week that you hate everybody and you just want to be left alone to recharge. And so I was super surprised when I found a lot of anxiety in truck driving. There was nobody to talk to, especially as a new person, as an FNG, right? As the fucking new guy trying to learn a job without any coworkers to kind of bounce things off of. There's nobody to have a conversation with. There's nobody really accessible to ask questions of. There's nobody to talk around the water cooler with, or to tell stories to, or to just have a conversation. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of time to listen to your music and listen to podcasts and, all that kind of stuff. But you're not having any interaction with anybody. For those of you who know, it's like being in an ad seg cell for 23 hours a day with nobody to talk to, and you start to go a little crazy. I started to feel a great deal of anxiety, and just it was a very strange situation. And going into it, I thought, the company that I work for paid for my training. So the training was, quote unquote free, but then I had to sign a 12-month contract to work for them for 12 months, or I have to pay all that training money back. I thought that's easy. I said, I can do anything for a year. Like, a year is nothing. I can go through hell for a year. And if it sucks after a year, then I'll quit. And so, 4 months into being solo on the road. So training was 6 weeks where I was out of town. I was in a motel 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, about an hour away from my house. And so I would be at school Monday through Friday, and then Friday evening I would come home, spend the weekend, and then Sunday evening I would go back up to my motel. So I did that for six weeks, and then went out on the road pretty much full time with my mentor, my driving mentor, who's meant to teach you all the ins and outs of truck driving. So I was basically on the road pretty much the same 5 days a week for another 3 weeks with that person. And then I tested out and went solo and went on the road. And so by the time I'd been solo for 4 months, I'd been actually on the road for I'd been on the job for 6 or 7 months by that point. And I was driving in the middle of this city on the phone with my wife, and I just completely lost my shit. Like, I'm driving a big rig that's total 75 feet long. You've got your sleeper cab, in the front, plus a 53-foot trailer. So I'm driving in the middle of this city during rush hour traffic, completely losing my shit, bawling my eyes out, tears running down my face. Tell my wife, I just can't, I cannot do this anymore. I just can't do it. And that really tripped me the fuck out, man. Like really? Um, 24 years in law enforcement, dealing on every work day, dealing with people who would probably love to see you dead. I'm driving this truck. There's nobody spitting on me. There's nobody cursing at me. There's nobody throwing their, feces and urine and blood at me. There's nobody trying to, stick me with a pencil or, punch me from behind when I'm, walking through the facility, or like all these things aren't, all I'm doing is driving a truck, and I'm just having a complete friggin' meltdown. And so like the next day I left, and which kind of freaked everybody out. It freaked me out. It kind of freaked my family out. And so now I owe, so now I've got to pay all this money back for my training for this company that I went through. And it's like to the tune of $10,000, which tells you how shitty it was. What a mental state I was in. Was like, I would rather pay you $10,000 than do this job for another 6 months. And so that's kind of the position that I'm in now, is working to try and pay back this company for the training that they gave me, because I just couldn't handle this job anymore, which is, it's sort of an embarrassing thing, sort of an embarrassing thing to say. Like, I think it's safe to say that when I was on the job, I was known as a pretty aggressive deputy. When you had a problem that needed solving, I was kind of one of the folks that you called to come help you solve it. And so it's really strange now to sort of be in this period of my life. I've come to realize that I don't think I have the capacity to endure stress that I used to have. It's like after 24 years, my cup is full. My cup is full of stress, and that stress doesn't just evaporate overnight. It's not like a cup of water that if you leave it out long enough, then that stress just evaporates, and eventually your cup of water is empty, right? Your cup of stress lasts much longer and doesn't evaporate nearly as quickly. And so I find that my tolerance for stress and anxiety is not nearly what it used to be. My cup runneth over much sooner than it used to. And so that's another thing to sort of get used to in this new phase of life. Stress is a very insidious thing, and it tends to really sneak up on us. and before you know it, you're dealing with all these sort of emotional issues, um, and it takes a while to downshift from that. Um, I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't. I don't know. I don't know if I can say that. That I wouldn't do it differently if I had to do it all over again. Um, like I said, I don't know that I was ever as a sensitive kid. I don't know that law enforcement was necessarily in my best interest. Um, I think I did well in it for the most part. Um, but I'm not sure that it was necessarily the place that I should have been. But hey, um, it made me the person that I am today. So it's kind of hard to poo poo those things that turn us into the people that we are, especially if we like who we are now, right? Um, I mean, it's one thing, if I looked in the mirror and thought I was just a big piece of shit, then maybe I can make that argument. Um, but at 52, I definitely feel like this is the best version of me that there has ever been. Um, I can honestly say my 20s were a complete train wreck. Um, my 30s weren't much better. My 40s I started to come around a little bit. And my 50s I'm super stoked about. It's I realized in the last, I don't know, little while, last month or two maybe, um that I'm a very emotionally immature emotionally immature person. Uh I mean, and there's certainly lots of things that I can use as an excuse, for that, childhood emotional traumas and you know, whatever. But at some point, I think we all need to uh, come to terms with our own shit and decide, is my past, whatever it may be, is my past going to define me, or am I going to take personal responsibility for that and do everything that I can do to break whatever negative cycle I've been in. And I really started to do that through my 40s and now into my 50s. Um, I think 40 was like a super pivotal year for me. Um, the I'd heard my entire career like the national standard for the life expectancy of first responders in retirement was like 3 to 5 years. And my plan had always been to retire at 50. And so the idea that if I retired at 50, that I was going to be dead by the time I was 53 or 55, like that didn't play that didn't play real well. I was expecting by the time I retired at 50, I was gonna I would have had like 27 years on the job, and I was bound and determined, like, damn it, I put in 27 years, I'm going to get at least 27 years worth of retirement out of these people. Um, and so at 40, that really kind of started to hit me like, um, you need to start working on your shit. You need to start working on your physical health. You need to start working on your emotional health. You need to get your blood pressure under control. You need to get back into, some sort of physical exercise. Uh, if I started to play the long game, I think at 40. And it was, I mean, it it took a good decade, you know. The physical aspects were challenging but rewarding in themselves, but the emotional work was tough. There was still a time when, if you were in therapy or went to see a counselor, that you were it was not, I wouldn't say it was frowned on necessarily, but there was definitely sort of a stigma attached to that. Um, Plus, like looking at your shit is hard, man. Like who wants to do that? Like can I just keep going down this path that I'm going down without having to take a look at all this kind of garbage um that hurts, that I would rather not have to take a look at. Um, but it's been super rewarding, and it can be done. And again, I think that culture the culture has changed, or is changing, um, as far as men especially, and folks in law enforcement in general, just being able to be more vulnerable with each other. Um, I notice a big difference, with my male friends, and being able to be more vulnerable about what hurts us. And I hope others find the same thing that I've found, is that it's not weakness to be vulnerable, that you get a lot of strength from that. Um, I've never I've never gotten a negative response from anybody when I'm vulnerable with them. I think our the brain that the story that our brain tells us is that if I open up to folks, that I'm gonna be seen as weak. People are gonna treat me differently. People will shun me. People won't respect me. And what I've found when when I open up and be vulnerable with people is that it draws my people to me. It draws my people to me. Everybody who is my friend is not necessarily my people. And I think it's important to keep our circles small for that reason. For that reason. This really came to light for me uh, in September. of 2017. My oldest daughter was at college in Arizona, and she got sick. She got sick with what we later learned was spinal meningitis, bacterial meningitis, which is a infection of your spinal fluid, which then becomes an infection of your brain and causes your brain to swell. And so she was 19 at the time, going to college, and she had been feeling poorly for a couple of weeks. And she finally called her mother one day and said, "Mom, can you come out and get me?" And if you know my daughter, like that was a pretty significant thing, because it's not like she wasn't at college like 20 minutes away. It was, this involved like a 7 or 8 hour drive to go out and get her. And so for her to ask her mom to do that was significant. And so by the time her mom got to her, mom took one look at her and was like, "We're going to the ER like right now." And so mom took her to the ER, and her mom called me and said, "Hey, I'm taking Leanne to the emergency room." I said, "Okay." And the next morning I got a call from her mom saying, the doctors have put Leanne into a medically induced coma. They think she has meningitis, and they want to try to bring the swelling down, in her brain. So they've put her in a medically induced coma. And I mean, and so obviously, at that point, like the whole world just starts to cave in. And so, to make a long story short, she was in the intensive care unit in Arizona for 2 weeks, and then she passed away. She was 19, and my whole phone book, my little black book, completely changed. All those people, not all those people, many people who for years I had assumed were down, who like had my back, were like, "Dude, you're my boy. I got you." Through, 24 years of cop shit, we're there and we're down. We're suddenly like gone. And I get it. I think in first responder ranks, especially, like people don't know what to say, right? Like your kid just fucking died. What am I gonna say? So I totally get that part. But then people who I never would have expected came out of the woodwork and were solid, rock solid. And it's embarrassing to say, like, they were much better friends to me than I think I would have been to them if the situation were reversed. And that's a very difficult thing to admit. And I hope you guys know who you are. I'm not going to shout you out quite yet. I'm not going to put you on blast, but I hope you guys know who you are. Um, and and your whole circle kind of changes. Um, and so to bring this kind of back around to vulnerability was like for the first time in my life that I can recall, I truly did not care what people thought of me. I was simply trying to live through the next 5 minutes without killing myself. Like you hear about people losing kids all the time. I mean, you hear about it all the time. From sickness or accidents or what have you. And I had always wondered for years, like, how does a parent survive the death of a child? How does that happen? And suddenly I was faced with that and wondering if I had manifested Leanne's death by my curiosity of how other parents survived that. And so during that time, I was just so numb. I'd be driving down the freeway at 55 miles an hour, and I would look down at the speedometer and I was going 110. And just like, oh, whoa. Like I had never experienced that kind of emotional numbness before in my life. And so when you're in a situation where you're trying to just trying to survive every day, just trying to figure out, like, how am I not going to kill myself today? I think that opens, at least for me, it did. It opened me wide up, opened me emotionally in ways that I hadn't been in 47 years at that point. And what I found was that people responded to that. Like, for the first time in my life, I realized that I could tell somebody no and they would still be my friend. I could tell somebody, no, I can't do that, and they would be understanding. I could tell somebody no, and they still loved me. And that kind of tripped me out. Like really? I mean, like, I don't have to, it's not a transaction. I'd always thought that love was transactional. Like, you love me because of the things that I do for you. In order for you to love me, I have to get good grades or follow your rules or you know, be a good boy, or, it always felt transactional. And so for the first time in my life, realizing that it didn't have to it didn't have to be that way. I could just be me. I could grieve. I could grieve and tell people no, and they would still accept me. And so that was a really crazy realization for me. And it, it's even weirder and crazier for me to admit that the death of my daughter has had positive aspects to it. Which is not to mean that I don't grieve for her almost every single day. But I definitely think that there's something to be said for, and I read this term recently, post traumatic growth. Post traumatic growth. That there are positive things that can come from traumatic situations. That it doesn't all have to be shit. That your life does not, from that point forward, have to be complete shit. And would I give up the positive things that have happened in over the last 5 years since she died if I could have 10 more minutes with my daughter? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would give that all up. I would live as the most angry, miserable son of a bitch in the world if I could spend 10 more minutes with her. But since that's not going to happen, I will enjoy this blessing that she has given me. To the best of my ability. And I'm not entirely sure where I was going with that. But it seems like a good place to stop for the day. So, Shawn Solo, episode 1. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Peace.